Oh, yeah. Listen, the struggle was not red. I experienced it, being deprived, being oppressed, even confused. It's enough now, we're taking the power back. We're stronger than before, we're prouder, too strong. The worst is over. From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar. From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the AZAPO Online Political Education Series. As you know, today we are discussing science, and I have one of the sons of Azania, brother Mojalefa Murphy, and he's going to be talking to us about the role of science in the rise of apartheid and implications of its decline in the democratic South Africa. Welcome, Brother Mojalefa, and it's great to have you here on this platform.
Thank you, Brother Simpiwe. I'm humbled.
Yeah.
I may look a bit tired.
Can imagine. And thanks for gracing us. Just a bit of
no problem
about Brother Mojalefa. He studied applied nuclear physics and obtained an honors degree in Bachelor of Science honors degree, and went further to obtain a Master's of Science degree in medical radiation physics. And these qualifications he obtained at Universities of Manitoba in Canada, as well as Surrey in the UK. He has worked in the radiation and nuclear medicine departments of Johannesburg and Charing Cross hospitals as a medical physicist, and he, as well as at what was known as the Atomic Energy Corporation and Itamba Labs as a consulting scientist, general and executive manager there. He didn't stop there. He went on to teach physics and science at UNIBO, as well as at the University of Toronto, and to radiographers and radiologists in the radiotherapy, field of radiotherapy. He has been very instrumental in introducing and imparting applied radiation and nuclear science knowledge among young Black scientists through his vision of establishing university and industrial collaboration meant to diversify tertiary skilled human resources through graduate schools by offering training programs such as the University of Northwest Masters in Applied Radiation Science, as well as technology, something called MAST. He has a strong sense of care for African people and has spent his entire life opening opportunities for the African youth at great sacrifice to himself, including going to exile twice. Brother Murphy, going to exile twice, I mean, undertaking. You know, he is married to Judith, and they have, you know, been blessed with 4 children. Welcome to this platform once more, and it's great to have you.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
It's not often that I sit here with, you know, scientists of your caliber, and I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot from you about, you know, science and what it did to our country, you know, during the height of apartheid, and looking at its impact on our country, you know, post-1994 during democratic dispensation. So let me just load up your slides so that we can begin to have a conversation around this. So you'll tell me when you can see your slides.
Yeah, I can see them. Maybe you can, yeah, I can see them clearly. Thanks, yeah.
You can see them clearly. Okay.
I can see clearly, yeah.
Great.
Okay, can I shoot?
Yeah, you can shoot. The floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah. The I must say that one cannot do justice to this topic within half an hour, and a lot has yet to be uncovered. But what I thought I could do, because of the times we are in, was to trace back into history so as to reorient ourselves up to the stage where we are. I'm not going to talk about science hardcore. I'm going to talk about the role of science. Science is, maybe we can go to the next slide. The whole thing of scientific inquiry became formalized between 3000 and 3500 BC in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. And it was just referred to as natural philosophy. I'll just go through history quickly.
Yes.
About 35,000 years old bone was discovered in the 60s on the borders of South Africa and Swaziland. And that bone is called the Bombo bone. And you can find it in a museum in Swaziland. And that happens to have etched on it. It's a femur of a baboon. On it, it's etched between 28 and 30 notches, which have been studies, and they seem to reveal that that was one of the oldest mathematical objects or technology used in tracking the moon. And studies further show that that could have been women who actually were also tracking their menstrual cycle. And they were in charge of population control because they were in charge of feeding the people according to anthropology. So you're talking 37 millennia ago, okay? Just keep track of the times here. And 10,000 years later, a similar bone was found on the borders of Zaire and Uganda. That is where the Nile River begins, at I think it's Lake Edward. And that bone also had similar etches, but then it started to reveal evidence of understanding of what we call prime numbers. And prime numbers are very important in computing, especially in encoding, in encryption. I won't go into that further. So what we now know about those two lunar tracking computers is that they seem to have formed the basis for the computational algorithm that is used in Egyptian computers. Next slide, please. The Moors, you know about the African Moors, had colonized Spain for about 700. There's a dispute as to what period, but in all, it's about 700 years. And they brought into Spain, into Europe, that was very backward, knowledge of mathematics, knowledge of astronomy, and technology in general. They were not colonizing in the same way that the Europeans colonized Africa and Americas and Australia. They would not convert people into Islam or force them to, to change their way. At that time, there was no nation state, but the only thing that they practiced was that if you are Muslim, you don't pay taxes. So a number of Europeans, to avoid paying taxes, they became Muslims. But even then, ethnically, the Moors were a minority, and outnumbered by the Europeans. However, in 1492, the Moors were overpowered by the local majority, and together with the Jews, they were driven out of Iberia. And that was the beginning of what we now call a modern nation state. In a nation state, you have nation states are made of a majority ethnic groups that are literally dominating, and minorities that are being tolerated. There's a lot of history around that, and I'm sure you can Google that. The white people, as we know them, were actually invented in 1613 by an English playwright, a Jacobean playwright called Thomas Middleton. You can get more about that. So just keep track of this. In 1613, white people are invented. There were no white people. And more than 37 millennia ago, African people were dabbling with prime numbers, constructing lunar tracking computers. What it means is that, especially with the advent of the Moors in Europe, is that our African forebears provided the scientific knowledge base for the 18th century Industrial Revolution. That Industrial Revolution, coal was harnessed as fuel to drive the economy, and machines were constructed to increase productivity, and transportation using the steam engine, for example, locomotives and ships, was introduced. And that is on the basis of the knowledge system that Africans brought into Europe. And the American settlers, or the European settlers in America, all they knew that they learned was from the Castilians in Spain. So they used the model of ethnic cleansing to take over America, and thus formed the first settler nation state. That's 1776. That's about 284 years since they settled. Next slide, please. On our shores, the British had just joined the Afrikaners in 1829, and they actually established the very first, or the forerunner of the very first University of Cape Town. And the emphasis was to harness to be able to benefit from the Industrial Revolution. And so the science and scientific and technical human resources was the target of that forerunner of the University of Cape Town. I think it's still there. That it's now called Sax College, South Africa College, something. I know my son went to that school next to Cape Town, and in Lesotho, which extended up to the Vaal River, King Moshoeshoe had already heard about this Industrial Revolution, so he actually co-opted the French missionaries. This is very important, not colonizing Europeans like the Dutch and the British, but he co-opted the French missionaries because he wanted to exploit the advantages of the skills that were coming with these white people. In fact, he was interested in guns, apparently, and artisanal skills, also horses and cats. Apparently, the place was infested with rodents, and agricultural produce was compromised. So, and he got a whiff that cats can solve the problem. That's how Basotho introduced cats in South Africa. However, and they built the very first institution, Beersheba Missionary Station, which is near Smithfield. But the militia, the Afrikaner militia, who were illiterate, this is very important, people should know this. The first people to be educated, at least in the Free State, after the English in Cape Town, were Black people, not Afrikaners. They actually destroyed that mission in 1858, And that way, they made sure that Black people generally were bypassed by the second industrial revolution. The second industrial revolution occurred in the middle of the 19th century, and it was basically harnessing gas, oil, and electricity as energy sources. If you want to understand how these revolutions have or impact on economies, you just have to follow how energy was harnessed. The first one, it was coal, and tons and tons of fossil fuel was extracted. And the second revolution was basically using that coal or fossil fuel to generate cleaner energy, electricity, and of course gas. And also in the second revolution, telecommunication was harnessed. That is telephony and telegraphy. I'm sure people who were not born, who were born after 70, they don't know what is a telegram. We grew up, our parents never wanted to receive a telegram because often it was an announcement of death or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 8 years later, in 1866, the Afrikaners built their own forerunner of the Stellenbosch University. And again, the emphasis was science and technology, or mathematical sciences and technology. Now, notice that the Afrikaners only built their institution long after the Basotho had actually built one with the aid of the French. Yeah, and it was, you see, people often mistake missionaries with colonizing powers. Now, they probably had different missions. You could have them on your own terms. So King Moshoeshoe had those French missionaries on his terms. And his terms was that they should transfer expertise to Basotho. But then, as we know, next slide, please. As we know that when we were colonized, we were actually deprived the expertise. In fact, our expertise was destroyed by our colonizers, like at Beersheba. I think I'm just summarizing the chronology of the establishment of these institutions that were being put in place to make sure that the settler colonialists benefit from the two industrial revolutions and the next ones. So you can see that the last one was built in 1910, and that is about 6 years before Fort Hare was developed. So after Beersheba, which should actually be the second oldest institution after University of Cape Town, we only got to have our first forerunner in 1916 in the form of University of Fort Hare. I'm sure your viewers can see the chronology of these developments. And when you look at these institutions, you take University of Potchefstroom, for example, if it's the Potchefstroom University, which was built in 1877, and the one Witwatersrand, they all have, or maybe go to the next slide before I get to that. They have, I don't know how to start this one. When the whites landed in South Africa and found vast spaces to take over and so on, the inspiration was what Americans were doing. Like here in North America, we have native reserves. We also have had native reserves in South Africa. These are created by the settlers. I think initially the literature shows that the Khoi and the San were actually being exterminated in the same way that the indigenous people of North America were being exterminated. But the Xhosas and other ethnic groups resisted. They were a formidable force. I think the South African white settlers changed tact and started co-opting and a lot of our own people to infiltrate. For example, with Basotho, literature shows that Mushrash gave them refuge, especially when they were on that great trek, moving from Cape Town. But then Basotho were shocked that the Afrikaners were beginning to sell land among themselves, something that was very foreign to Basotho, because land was in the custody of the state or the king, and you are allocated a place to grace and to live, but you can't sell that. But these Dutch people started selling land among themselves and literally taking over the land. Yeah, but they after colonizing and having four, by that time they were having four republics in South Africa. Two were Dutch, Transvaal and Free State, and two were British, Natal and Cape colonies. And they combined in 1910, following the example of the Americans, to form the federal state or the Union of South Africa. But it was premature because they had not completely obliterated the desire of Black people to regain their land. And even though they had tricked some to say, okay, you're going to have your homeland there, and then eventually they would, the intention was to make them free states, 13% of the land that was allocated to us in 1913. But during all this time, we were deprived the opportunity to advance ourselves scientifically and technically, but white people were actually advancing to the point that in the 20th century, with the discovery of nuclear energy, so we had now a transition from coal-powered electricity and gas to nuclear energy, and also the advent of electronics, which sparked the third industrial revolution. We were completely bypassed, and that happened at the time when the Union of South Africa was formed. So we were busy struggling when they were busy accumulating knowledge. It doesn't mean that there were no Black people who were studying science, but there were just few Black people. I mean, for example, you can take any family. Many people with degrees, for example, in science in their families, many, I bet that they are the first in generations to obtain a science degree. Whereas if you take your white counterpart, they are probably third, fourth generation, So that's how we were stunted. And of course, during that, the Industrial Revolution, there's two pieces of technology that are very important. That is the PLCs, programmable logic circuits, and robots. You'll see how that takes us into the fourth industrial revolution. Next slide, please. So we've already talked about the calculated intellectual stunting of Black people, particularly in science and technology. And that was a strategy for the whites to create a settler nation state in which they would dominate, because we would have to be dependent on them and we would be in the homelands independent. And all they could tolerate was a minority of Indians and so-called colors, and maybe a sprinkling of Africans. But generally the plan was to have us form our own states that would be dependent economically on them so that they remain dominant. Like I think we talked about it, you see we have University of Fort Hare, which was formed in 1916, but then it was appropriated in 1959. This is now when the Afrikaners were in power, entrenching apartheid. And Tefluop, Western Cape, were also established in 1959. And notice that all of these ethnic universities are actually built in the so-called homelands. And then Zululand came in 1960. For the Indians, Durban Westville in 1972, Transkei in 1976. It was a branch of University of Fort Hare, and Bophuthatswana in 1979. I think you can go to the next slide. The achievement, just to give the meat to the preparedness of the settlers in harnessing the second and the third industrial revolution. They had built a company for telegraphy by 1860, which means they did catch up with the second industrial revolution. And Telkom was established, or the forerunner of today's Telkom was established in 1910, and that harnessed telephony. I think there was still telegraphy as well. And then Eskom, through brilliant physicist Hendrik van der Bijl. Van der Bijl Park is named after him. Van der Bijl Park is a town next to Vereeniging. He was South African, but then he ended up in Europe and ended up in America, where he studied with great minds like Millikan, the one who found the charge on an electron, who measured the charge on an electron. And at the time, Prime Minister John Smuts invited him to come back to South Africa. And when he came back to South Africa in 1923, that's when he established Eskom with a loan of 16 million rand. And it's a very brilliant story, that one, given what's happening to Eskom now. And then the Atomic Energy Corporation, the forerunner was the AEB, was formed in 1948. You can see now in the 20th century, nuclear energy is being harnessed. I remember, well, I think I put the last minute slide on the Atomic Energy Corporation to illustrate the dismantling of the whole establishment. And of course, and many people believe that the friendship of the National Party Youth League and the Youth League of the Nazis in Germany netted South Africa the German technology of Fischer-Tropsch that is used in Sasol to convert coal to synthetic liquid fuel. A brilliant technology. Remember, South Africa doesn't have oil, but then for aviation and so on, you need fuel based on hydrocarbons, liquid fuel. And so South Africa was able to establish a system to do that. And the Nazis had established this one mainly to propel their war machinery. They say that 90% of the fuel requirements for the Nazi aircraft, fighter aircraft, was actually produced from coal that was found in Germany, thanks to the Nazis. I think people know that Sasol stands for Zuid-Afrikaans Steenkool Olie, something like that. Next slide, please. I'll just quickly go through what I consider the impact of the decline of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematical institutional capacity in democratic South Africa. You see, I'm very superstitious and very suspicious. I don't think it's all because of Black people being corrupt and incompetent. I think it was set up. And you can see that the setup happened with all the intellectual stunting. And I think the trigger was pulled around 1985 when the ANC started talking to the National Party and white business people and the white elite about power transfer. But what happened was that after the PAC and ANC were banned, when there was no longer political activity, the Black consciousness movement sprang up in the late 60s and actually disrupted the white settler, the white nation settler state project. Remember, the whites had not finished creating their settler state, their nation state, in the way that Americans had. We're still the majority, and we kept fighting, and I think we are still going to fight even further. So they had probably thought that they had done the job when ANC and PSC were banned, because then they were dishing out this independence to Transkei, I think was the first to get it, and then Bophuthatswana, and then Venda. But then B.Sc happened, and that project was disrupted. And by that time, whites had monopolized STEM, okay? So then political power transfer happened. But then that it's very obvious, we don't know the details, but that happened on the terms of white people. Because the ANC was on the wall with the Soviet Union falling apart, where the material support came from. And then these seems to be the terms of transferring power to the ANC. The economy, which was nationalized, people have to know that South African white economy was nationalized and socialist in its distribution, in the same way that the Nazis, they actually copied the Nazis, organized their national socialism. So that economy was denationalized, and the STEM infrastructure started being disintegrated. And then there was deindustrialization, basically. Even those industries that were put on the borders with the so-called homelands, like Hammanskraal and you go to Mafeking, there used to be some industry there. It's all gone. And then privatization of public services. We now have private companies looking after our water, and there's talk of ESCOM and SAA being privatized and all that. So in my opinion, you asked me for my opinion, looking at from the applications of science and the history of its being harnessed, one can say that there were terms of transferring power to the ANC, and those terms at least include privatization, deindustrialization, and denationalization, which means we have been pushed back to pre-industrial era. And I don't know how we're going to make it again to get to the point where we should actually be frantic preparing for the transition to the fourth industrial revolution, where now we have to harness renewable energies and the internet and advanced communications fully. So what is exacerbating the problems that we're having, of course, is corruption. Corruption is not the cause. It's only exacerbating the problems that we have. The problems that we have are structural, and they come with the package we have inherited. And also being the most unequal country in the world, we can see, as in other countries, escalation of violence, which is also very disruptive. So unless we do something to turn the tide, I think we're going to be in a worse situation than you have in places like Congo, where you have a great wealth of mineral resources, but they cannot manage them and benefit from that. And these situations are manufactured for the benefit of those that control the world economy. You take Zimbabwe, for example. Zimbabwe has one of the most strategic natural resources, cesium. Cesium is very rare, especially the stable cesium-133. And that cesium is used to make what are called atomic clocks, which are applied in communications technology. You know what a clock is? It's actually a reference so that for example, your GPS wants a very accurate clock in calculating positions and predicting, giving, like when you navigate, with your vehicle, using your GPS, you can actually predict what time you'll be wherever and so on. And to get that most accurately, the current technology using just quartz reference is not good enough. So now atomic clocks are being used. And the Chinese have mopped the monopoly of making those, of the material cesium. And they actually are building military bases in Zimbabwe to make sure that that cesium is not taken by anybody else. The other mine is here in Canada, in Ontario. And Trump made a very big mistake by allowing the American company to sell that company that had the monopoly of cesium to the Chinese. And I think that is why we have these trade wars taking place. So science and technology, its understanding is very important in governing your country and growing the economy. If you don't have that, like our government seem to be ignorant about it, forget it. It'll just end up being just a mine dump where people just come and get resources and go and develop their own economies. Do we still have another slide? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. This is just an illustration of what happened to the atomic energy. I know Atomic Energy Corporation because I worked there from 1992 to 1990, whatever, 6, 7. The idea is when you have resources, you should be able to manage them and benefit from them. They be human resources, they be natural resources, whatever resources you have. Now, South Africa happened to have lots of uranium, and uranium in South Africa comes as a byproduct of gold. So I think it was John Smuts who actually became interested in uranium after the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were dropped. Being a soldier himself, he felt that South Africa could benefit from that. So he actually ordered prospecting of uranium, only to find out there's so much of this uranium all over the place. And by the time the Afrikaners took over, the Atomic Energy Board was formed. So there are already mines in South Africa producing uranium, and that uranium, interesting, the Afrikaners battered it for technology transfer with Americans. Americans were looking for uranium all over the place because they wanted to increase their nuclear arsenal. So the South Africans were selling their uranium to the US in return for expertise. So they were sending young Afrikaners abroad to go and learn and study nuclear physics, nuclear engineering, and so on, and then transferring technology. And then I think by early 60s, they already had the technology to beneficiate uranium. So in beneficiating uranium, you have to have a factory, it's called conversion plant, which converts the uranium into a gas called uranium hexafluoride. And then it is that uranium hexafluoride that you process to separate the isotope that is more potent to make nuclear fuel. That isotope is from uranium-1, from what was it, U-234? Okay, uranium-235. That is the fissile one. And then you have a plant to convert to UF6, uranium hexafluoride, and then you have another plant, a major plant, to enrich that gas, uranium hexafluoride. And this is what Americans don't want the Iranians to have, Iranians. And South Africa had that technology that they were using centrifuges, a cascade of centrifuges to extract the fissile uranium-235. And then once you've extracted it, like it, you have concentrated that fissile one, then you have another factory to produce the fuel. And then within another factory that contains, that makes containment of that fuel, just like copper wires, copper pipes. Remember that plant, we're using zirconium, which is a special material to contain enriched material, because it stops neutrons from coming in. Because once you have enriched uranium, you don't want a stray neutron, because that can start a chain reaction. And that plant that was making that uranium cladding using zirconium was sold to the Chinese. I think it was 1997. Lots of Chinese came to the AEC and to come and literally dismantle the plant and have a look at it and dismantle it and take it to China. And I remember the Home Affairs, somebody told Home Affairs that there's lots of Chinese there, we don't know what's happening. And then there were police going to stop them. At that time I was suspended because I was accused of having abused the credit card. But the fact is that I think I was being taken away so that I don't see all of that, because even though I was in the executive, I didn't know that the Chinese would be coming to get that zirconium plant. And all my stay there, I was questioning why there was so much dismantling of this technology that had nothing to do with nuclear bombs, you know. So that's hilarious. And of course, the fuel is used in the nuclear reactor to generate electricity, and then once it's spent, you have another facility to store it. And all of these steps require human resources that are skilled. But let me tell you, most of it is now gone, and I don't think we'll see it. And not only it's standalone, it's not standalone, this thing. We have a network of academic work and research that depends on this spin-off technologies. For example, we started looking at what can we make with all the expertise within this nuclear industry. And one of the things that we started researching on was the filters for helicopters. You know, when a helicopter takes off, it gathers a lot of dust, and then especially military ones, and when it lands, the same. So each time before takeoff, they change the filter to make sure dust doesn't get into the engine. So we started making that, and also water purification systems. So these are the spin-offs, and also radioisotopes for medical applications. In fact, this one is interesting. Americans were putting pressure on South Africa to blend down their bomb-grade, highly enriched uranium. And I was very impressed with the Afrikaner, my colleagues, executive. They refused. They said, no, we are now making, using this nuclear fuel to make radioisotopes for medical applications. And we want highly enriched one because it produces less, you know, there was a scientific reason why we refused. And we remember the name of the guy is Dr. Nico van der Walt, who actually came up with the method of extracting one particular isotope called molybdenum-99 to produce a daughter of that isotope called the technetium-99, which is used in nuclear medicine. In nuclear medicine, they mix that technetium-99, which is radioactive, with a pharmaceutical and inject it in your body. And once it gets to the targeted organ, it begins to radiate, and then there are detectors called nuclear cameras. And so you can observe an organ that is actually alive, a bioscope of an organ. Beautiful stuff. But guess what? That technology, we did come up with a technology to use low enriched uranium to produce radioisotopes for medical applications. But that technology now ended up in Australia. A friend of some guy, forget his name, who was the CEO of Next. After I had left, of course, he brought his friend in, and the two ended up. I don't know. He brought him in, and then there he goes to set up a factory in Australia with the aid of the Australian government. So basically, we've been had because I think our leaders were more focused on political power, and people like me were not listened to. I remember trying to talk to Penwell Maduna. He was the Minister of Energy at the time. When I was realizing all this nonsense. And I went to his office after many efforts to try to meet him. Finally, he said, "Come and see me." I went to his office, and before I could settle in my chair and exchange pleasantries, he said to me, "Do you want to run that place?" You know.
Oh, wow.
Now, me, I'm Musutu. You know, I'm Musutu. I don't go to the front seats. I have to be called to the front seat. I said, no, not exactly. And he said I should get out. Literally, my friend. He said, get out. His PA was so shocked. I think she peed in her panties, that woman.
Oh, no.
You know, I mean, the only thing that consoled me was that I was confronted by a very ugly guy who's as thick as two short planks, you know, with no brain cells to rub together in his skull, you know, and I just left. I wasn't hurt at all, you know. I said, "This is it." Now, you see, I was naive politically. You know, I thought these people would see somebody with some expertise, but then I realized that either there was an arrangement here, and we're being played, or these people are just dumb. They don't know what they've inherited. In fact, after that, I befriended one woman who was freelancing and making documentaries for SABC, and then because I wanted to document everything, and she did. That woman, she did help me. We documented that documentary was flighted only once, and then that was it. And nobody wants to see it. It shows everything, and of course, there could have been another pressure that Americans, the Israelis, and the French didn't want any evidence that they were transferring technology to South Africa during the UN embargoes. So it was in hindsight that I realized that the ANC was put under great pressure to get rid of that. But then they didn't have to be honest. Countries were dying to hell. Look at Iran. Iran is dying to keep their expertise, you know, and we just gave it away. And in fact, some of our Belungu, they're just taking it. I mean, we could build our own nuclear reactors. When I got there, we could build our own nuclear reactors. We could train our own people. Now, some engineers went to Argentina, and I know from the reactors I saw that are supposed to be made in Argentina, that was the blueprint from the AEC. I mean, my heart was broken. So after I was accused of abusing credit card, and then we settled out of court because I was challenging that. I thought maybe I no longer have future in South Africa, and because I had just started the family, you know.
Yeah.
But then a professor from England decided that it's stupid for me to go, because I was going to go to England and see if I can reconnect with my buddies there and get a job. And he had just come to be the head of Itemba Labs and invited me to come, and I went to help him. Then it was another disaster after 4 years at Itemba Labs. Maybe something I will will talk about.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next slide, please.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, this is a concluding slide. Yeah, basically, it's with a heavy heart that I say that my observation that South Africa is not prepared to transition into this new industrial change, where we have to harness renewable energies and completely provide everybody access, connectivity to internet and advanced communications technology, because now economy is going to be propelled by renewable energies and the internet. Education is going to go like that way. In places like Canada, it's already happening that way. Now we are looking for jobs anywhere in the world that way. Many young people don't even go to university anymore because they can have access to information, and they are starting their own innovative ways of making. For example, my son, who dropped out from university, doesn't want to see university because he doesn't want to accumulate a debt. He approached the motor industry regulators here in Canada and said, in Toronto province, and said that he would like them to give him a license to trade online and have virtual showroom. Now, that's what young people do, because you don't need to have now cars in a showroom somewhere. You can have a virtual showroom. People can shop from from their homes, and then you can have the car delivered without actually going to a showroom, without even going to a bank. So that is my concluding slide, and I think we can talk if you want to talk further.
No, thanks for sharing your thoughts, and I think it's been it's been a wonderful journey that you've just taken us through, and we really appreciate the share, and it's great interacting with scientists as always, and just pricking their minds about what they see as something that's been happening in our country and what should be happening. But we like to just interact a bit with you, and I see there's a hand already. Just allow this comrade to share his views on your presentation, comrade Nelson.
Thank you very much, Brother Simpiwe, and special thanks to Brother Mojalefa.
Thank you,
beautiful presentation, which was so accessible even to an illiterate lay person like me.
Illiterate? No way. I read your post. You're far from that. In fact, I have to apologize. I may not be well coordinated because I haven't had much sleep. So I'm sorry this. Anyway, it's not very clear.
So I'm glad that you could speak about science, technology, innovation, mathematics in the manner that you did. And I was also glad that a Black person like me spoke with such authority that made me proud. I'm saying this because, these things like STI, STEM, all those things you talk about are seen as confronting us from outside, are seen as products that are foreign from us, when in fact, as you have demonstrated, those things were organic to us. That knowledge was organic. And I'm glad that you spoke about the ancient calculator, classical calculator, the Libombo bone from Swaziland, which is the basis of all calculations today. But I was also glad that you were able to demonstrate that as these knowledge and information was organic to us, and then being the primary knowledge creators, we were in fact as Africans the people that exported this knowledge to other nations.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? Yes, and I was glad. I was glad that you were also, you.
We are losing you. Comrade, we are losing you.
Our development was punctuated deliberately and systematically. But I want to get to the point now where you say, and I agree with you, where you talk about the Afrikaners, and nationalizing the economy at some stage in a more or less socialistic, models. But I wish you had said they ethnicized that economy. Because I look at, as against nationalization, I look at it as ethnicization, because it was ethnic.
Yeah.
It was ethnic.
Oh, yeah. In fact, let me come in.
Let me explain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just finish by saying that you are right. You are right. The Afrikaners did everything and then propelled in by their isolation, the fact that they were isolated by the international community, which then forced them to be independent, which forced them to be self-reliant as a people and a dirty people, cruel people, which is why during that time, the gross expenditure on research and development as a percentage of GDP went very high. It went through the roof, then at the level of 1.1% during apartheid times. And then you see by 1994, you see what they do, because they had to do that, because they had to do the warfare machinery, the Wolfpack and everything that you talk about, which they exported. But come 1994, and I'm interested in this one. Towards 1994, then immediately they dismantle all the nuclear program. They dismantle them. And today we are hailed as a peaceful nation in the world, when in fact we're not involved in the dismantling of that program. They did it because they would not want to transfer it to a black government, or so to speak. And today there is a reduction of activity, at the Pebble, at the PBMR plant, as you know. And I would want you to come in there so we understand why is there such a reduction, when in fact at this point in time we're looking at the ascendancy of research and development activity, science and innovation activity. In fact, we wanted to see it, though it is nice to be producing, producing the publications that are going higher and higher, the publications, but we also want to see the commercialization.
Oh, yes.
And in fact, the invention side of things. We want things that we can put our fingerprint on it, and we say, this is ours, this is black, this is Azanian, this is African. Thank you so much, Brother Jelly.
No problem. Yeah, I wanted to clarify that the project of nation-state building by the Afrikaners, or the whites in South Africa, we interrupted it. It's actually B.Sc that interrupted that, So you're right when you say that the economy was ethnicized. It was for whites only. But then at the same time, we still said South Africa is a one nation. So maybe there's a semantics there. But it's true that it was for whites only. And once whites lost power, they make sure that we don't get it, don't have access to it in a very subtle manner.
Notice, are you saying something?
No, I'm done.
Okay, no, thanks. No, I think
Thank you.
it's been a beautiful contribution from Brother Nervis there, and you know, beautiful engagement. But it's quite interesting, as you say, you know, that you know, it was the Black movement that you know, forced the dismantling of you know, the scientific white power structure, and it's quite an observation. But of interest to me, why is it? Okay. Why is it that you know, with the ascendance of you know, Black people into the roles of governance in the country, that they cannot fathom the importance of science and technology to advance the interests of this country? Because I mean, it's quite alarming to see our government so much dependent on foreign aid. I mean, typical example is we are confronted with the COVID-19 now, and you know, the vaccination program has to be imported, and everything about you know, science related to this country has to be you know, dependent upon you know, from you know, foreign governments. We look to you know, yourselves in North America, we look to you know, the UK and others to come and assist. So we love the cap in hand approach. We love this thing of saying, you know, come and help us. We don't have knowledge, as though this country had no preponderance of knowledge, had no dominance of knowledge in the you know, field of science and innovation. Because I mean, as you put it, you know, prior to 1994, with the isolation of the apartheid state, you know, science was so predominant in this country that you know, whites were in charge of their destiny, and everything got dismantled, you know, just in the democratic era, and everything just collapsed as though there is, you know, science stopped, you know. If you can just unmute there.
Okay, I think we should not underestimate the imperial powers that we had to contend with. You know, what we could have done is to look at our own weaknesses and try to remedy them. Our weaknesses were from this competing politically for power instead of, and also and dividing people. You see, that one reason I love B.Sc is because B.Sc talks of unity and solidarity. It makes a lot of sense, and that is what threatens. That is what threatens our detractors. That's what threatened apartheid. Before B.Sc, as soon as Sobukwe left ANC to form PAC and demonstrated the potency of PAC to mobilize people. You know, I mean, mind you, PAC didn't wait for a long time. Soon after PAC was formed, they were able to mobilize the entire country against past laws.
Yes, and got into action in time.
And then you had a very articulate leader and a very clear leader who would never sell out his people. And they had to get rid of him. But then he was very intelligent, he was very smart. He knew the law. They could not arrest him for anything but to isolate him. That's why they made a special law to isolate him. And when it was time for him to be released, they realized that we have to get rid of this person. I don't believe that he died natural. I don't think that cancer was natural. And this is where we become stupid. We never gone into finding out exactly what happened to that great man. Now comes Abo Biko, Abo Mapetla, Mohapi. Then they found out that now they are surrounded. B.Sc in the 70s, they were not chance takers. They were thinkers and they were doers. And I mean, they mobilized people. I was young that time. I was in high school, and I was always into the sciences and so on. But they made me understand what the hell is going on. It was nonsense, to the point where When Steve was murdered, we took it upon ourselves to commemorate, to put together a memorial service, defying the school regulations and the police. Huh? And they, you see, we fail to say that here are our strengths. Let's improve and make and exploit them. Here are our weaknesses. Let us remedy our weaknesses. We compete. Let me tell you, there was no reason for me to go into exile again. There's no reason why a brother is fighting me when I say that this guy stole and I'm not going to help to cover this up. And I spent about almost 10 years digging out exactly what happened, you know. I wanted to find out these guys were covering their asses because they were being corrupted. And that's how your enemy gets to you. They corrupt you, or they launch a smear campaign against you. They do everything. But if you're upright and they don't get you, then you win. I can tell you that we haven't really interrogated exactly how we ended up in this situation. This situation is not just, it's potent people ended up just ducking because you have all sorts of chance takers now who are in there, and also all manner of things. In fact, we are a laughing stock of the world.
You know, the thing that really, you know, irks me is the fact that you're there living your life in Toronto, and you did say some of your colleagues are the nuclear physicists, you know, all over the world in other countries of the world, and you know, contributing to science development in those countries. And we have a lot of Black scientists who are very intelligent and very clever, and who can and have the capacity to contribute to science development in our own land. Why is it that, you know, the concept of Black solidarity does not apply to Black scientists insofar as them coming together and contributing to advancement of science development in their own country? I mean, you're contributing to science development in Canada right now. Why can't you come home and you know, be in solidarity with other scientists and contribute to this you know, nation's scientific development? Because let's face it, without you know, the likes of yourself and other scientists, there's plenty of them in our country. We can advance this country and we can contribute. And the real question that needs to be asked is, what needs to be done to enable, more especially what I call patriotic scientists, to come together and make a contribution to scientific development? If you can just unmute there.
Yeah, you guys need to, you need to be more proactive, you know, to be honest. You have to, the question that you're asking me, you should ask these questions and then do something about them. Let me tell you why I left. I didn't have to leave.
Of course, that's
and I'm not a career politician. I'm not interested in becoming a minister of science or director general or those kind of things. You know, I left because I could not understand why people cover up stealing and they want me to participate in that. If I participated in covering up somebody stealing, I would still be in South Africa. Maybe I would be earning lots of money, or I would be advisor to the president or something, you know? I just refused. And then the brother who doesn't like me, and then he's powerful. And the next thing I find myself not being able to get a job. People that I trained becoming CEOs and so on. And I'm looking for a job in my own country. That's why I ended up. Now, the problem is that we don't ask, you know, we have this thing that maybe it comes from the times of when we were oppressed. When somebody stole, see, there used to be guys that worked at a jewelry shop, and they would be stealing watches, and then they would be selling watches. People would be selling meat, you know, and that kind of thing. And then we tolerated that. We used to say that there was a term for that, you know. When you have scored, you know. Scoring, you know. You know. Maybe we have that mentality. I don't know, but and we won't say. I'll give an example. The former Minister of Science and Technology was AZAPO leader, Brother Mangena. When we were being harassed, he never asked his colleagues, what is this and what can we do? He never even called me to say, hey, what is happening? What can we do about the situation? Never. They buy what they're told, hook, line, and sinker. I don't know what it is. There are many people who have just left. I know one guy in Australia who left because of the harassment. And because of Umlungu, who was in the Director General in there. In fact, science and technology policy in South Africa was developed by two white men, with the backing of white industrialists. When we got back from exile, or before '94, we got together and formed what we used to call Black APSET, Association of Black Scientists, Engineers, and Technologists. Beautiful, man. We were marching, you know. We were marching at a CSIR campus there, you know. We launched it officially, and then we had, I remember Khoso Mugele, the guy with a very big voice. He was one of the leaders, and there was another one from Lesotho, Mulapo somebody, I don't remember his name. Abo Boingi Wenjob, they were there, the leaders. After launching, we didn't hear anything, but the leaders got jobs in government. The leaders were director generals in government. This one is going to be the head of the research council and all that. And then the National Science and Technology Forum emerges, a forum of white people. Now, that's undemocratic because Black people voted that ANC into power. But the policies are created by two white men with the backing of white industrialists. What nonsense is that? So I started to ask him questions, which is where I started, I think, getting hated, you know, and nobody would bother. So once they got an opportunity, maybe that's when they struck, you know, and nobody, even today. In fact, when you asked me to come and talk, I thought it was too short a notice, you know. But a friend of mine said, no, talk, you know. I was lucky because I found this book somewhere in the basement. I contributed a chapter here, you know, and so it helped me to prepare this because my mind is somewhere else, you know. And then the notes I sent you because I wanted you to have some idea.
Activists are always ready to serve.
Yeah. So then I said, yeah, I'll do it, you know. Like now in 2 hours time, I have to go and I'm going to drive 6 hours to Montreal to go and get my daughter. I said, I will come because all that I want to tell you is that you guys stop lining up for a job of government or wanting to be in parliament or that nonsense. You guys start learning how to look after your resources, you know. I'm not a great scientist or anything like that, but I can be a resource. So you look after your resource, you know. So when all this crap happened, you know, and nobody to run to, nobody, in fact, people are literally running away from me. I said, what kind of people are we? So the problem, we are the problem. Don't be looking at Abelung. They're doing what they must do to fuck us up. That's what they must do. That's what they want to do, you know. So blaming them, you know, and then even don't blame fucked up people like these ANC people who have some power. They're really fucked up. They need help. They need help. And you don't have to go into a political arena to do this thing. Why don't you go into that village and build a proper toilet that where young children cannot drown in you know? Why don't we do that? And yet people are driving BMW. Huh? You see a guy BMW, you know? There's something that's not right with us.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder after apartheid or what it is, I don't know. But there are lots of things that we can do and bring that pride in us and move on. We don't need to be be in elections and campaign for elections and with AZAPO t-shirts and all that nonsense. You go to that village, you go to that township and say, there's a problem with schooling here and that kind of thing. Then we can find a way of, oh, these guys don't have a maths teacher and so on. We can find a way of even somebody in London, wherever, chipping in to teach. There are ways we have to think. Now people want to go to parliament to make decisions. And those many millionaires, where do they get that money from? That's taxpayers' money. I know millionaires in South Africa that never worked.
Yeah.
I mean, he may be a lawyer or something, but there's no way that a lawyer could make that much money where they pay 30,000 rand a month just to look after the landscaping in that, what you call,
The landscape of
estates.
Yeah, yeah.
In the estates, they pay some fees to the estate administration, and this is just for, I don't know what they call them, those fees that they pay. 30,000, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes, Momi Metsing here, really fascinated by your presentation and the story of your leaving the country. And the real question that she's asking is whether we have lost the battle, and whether we have a way of getting it right, because she feels that sometimes we're losing it every day. As thought-provoking as some of the submissions we make are, but we seem to be losing the battle every day. And the question is, what now? What next? What should we do to circumvent all of this and deal with this situation?
I've been detached a little bit from South Africa. I came back here in 2006.
Yeah.
I do follow some things on the internet. Sometimes Nyafagas are on this Facebook,
Yeah.
But there's a growing group on Facebook. Well, that's another thing which I think is a sign of bad mental health. People are on different groups on Facebook, and people this, what, but then I think I understand. There's a rupture of it's information age, and we are discovering. But there are some people who are not well that participate in these things. Yeah. So I see a development with this group, Yaga Biko's Legacy, which Baba Mafuna put together. In fact, he's been trying. Let me tell you one thing. Don't go to Franz Fanon. Don't go to Karl Marx. Don't go. If you want the analysis of what's happening, we have to be our own resource. And people like Ubaba Mafuna, a person who lived through the times of Sobukwe and Biko, those are the resources. I can tell you that. I spent an afternoon with him last time I was in South Africa. I was fascinated, tapping his mind, and he's old, and he may not be with us for some time, in the near future, he may not be with us.
Yeah.
You can get a lot. That's where you can get guidance. But our problem is that we think we know better because we went to UCT. We think we know better because I'm from London School of Economics.
Yeah, or I'm from Wales.
I'm from Wales. And whereas we are actually very stupid. We've been stupefied. Education, what you get from Wales and UCT is 5% knowledge. That is enough to launch you into getting educated out in the field. And if you don't work in your field of study, you have zero chance of getting educated. I know a lot of people with a master's, B.Sc, PhD in chemistry, physics, but they never worked in physics or chemistry or whatever. They are big managers of whatever, and what they do, they rely on Abelung, and nothing happens.
No, thanks,
So,
brother. Yeah, no, I think it's quite fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to a day when our own Black scientists make prominent the the knowledge about science, and the fact that 37 million years ago there was a Libombo bone that was used to count. There was Ishango bone, which was used in Uganda, Zaire, and those countries, used for computational reasons, used for counting menstrual periods, used for development of prime numbers. And that knowledge is sitting with those of us who are close to science, and the majority of the developers of that knowledge in science are not aware. And our Black scientists are focused on the BMWs, and they're not consolidating this knowledge and teaching our people. How do we advance this society as we close, Brother Murphy?
I think we have a problem because we are unstable people. We are not stable in the sense that some of us have relatives who have nothing to eat, or there's so much crime taking place. Uzuma doesn't want to go to court, he's undermining the rule of law. Utochio Juanes says people stole $1 trillion. You see, in such confusion, it's very difficult to impart knowledge. I mean, I can assure you, people cannot focus. People don't focus. They can't. I've been trying to instigate, sometimes thinking I could contribute my knowledge and even some resources to do things. When this COVID started, I had thought that for some reason I knew that the government is not going to be able to cope with this thing, and the only thing that could be done is, just an example, is to make sure that people have nutritious food with lots of vitamin D and so on, and people are not cramped together. I talked to one guy and say, what? Let's take 1,000 families, clusters of 1,000 households, and see if we can intervene. And once we are organized, we can even get international aid. It's very difficult to get aid from anywhere when you're not organized. Then daughter just disappeared because he lives in Sentin and he's okay, he's covered. Lawyers must come together in South Africa, or progressive lawyers must come together in South Africa and talk about what is it that we can do to, number one, to look after our resources, starting with human resources. There are many people who, I was very lucky because I took up citizenship here in Canada before I went back home. And if I was stuck at Kai, I would probably have sold out and say, I'll join them for the sake of my family. I'll do what they say I must do. I think I had an advantage that I have a fallback position. And it was just intuition that let me take this Canadian citizenship so that I can have a passport. Because when you're a refugee, we used to use a passport issued by the UN. We used to call it the blue mamba. Some countries, they wouldn't let you in. So, I was tired of that, So that's when I said it, because we were going to conferences in Europe and other places. So I'll take Canadian citizenship. And one of the reasons I didn't want to take it was because you have to swear allegiance to the Queen, And Millennium Zonda, she comes from a family that messed us up. So, but then I quietly, secretly swore allegiance to passport, and it helped a lot. Then when I went back home, I said, now I'm home. And I was recruited by the Afrikaners. Now I'm home. I don't need no shit. Now I'm here and we're going to work. And we were working, my brother. Let me tell you, those boys, they knew that they were finished because all these blacks that were outside are coming to replace them because they were studying abroad and so on. I mean, they had a complex of inferiority, a number of them, you know. But at the same time, there were those who genuinely saw the folly of this apartheid and we could do something. I remember within no time, when we were looking at changing the research and development into things that the Black community could benefit from. We're looking at the coal stoves, you know, with all the smoke, and said, how can we reduce the smoke? Because there's no way the country can buy out all the coal stoves and use electric stoves. Yeah. And we started doing research, and there was a device that we came up with, and I named it Musipote because it was working. Musipote, because it was working. You couldn't see any smoke coming out. You got this device. The only problem with that device was that it was using electricity, and now there's no electricity in some of the townships. That's why we abandoned it. You know, but now we could use solar energy to actually zap that. Just thinking, you know. And then the other thing we said, hey, a lot of women, Black women, suffer from cervical cancer and, you know, intracavitary cancers. Then we came up with a prototype of a machine. It's called brachytherapy afterloader. You know, I didn't have to worry about anything. I would say I need a team of this and that and that. Whether it was budgeted for or not, they would find money for me to do and carry out the work. Then we are thinking, you know, and this thing starts when we are having tea. So I'm tired of being the only Black scientist here. We have to train Black people, you know. These Afrikaners agree with me. Then I come up with an idea. The following day, I discuss the idea. They like it, and then well, some say the management wants the program to be done at University of Pretoria for political reasons now because they'll get more money, and others want face, others want Potchefstroom. I say nonsense. We're going to Northwest University where there are Black people, and I can make a case. But no, we don't want to take Black people out of where they live and put them here and be stared with blue eyes and be intimidated. We whites, because there wouldn't be many Black lecturers to teach some of the courses in this nuclear science and radiation. It would be whites. I would say you whites will have to go there. And eventually we started it, my brother. I remember we were talking, exchanging stories when the whole thing, it was a success. We have a PhD guy who's now running CNS. It used to be Council for Nuclear Safety. I don't know what it's called now. His name is Bismarck Schobeck. You can Google him. He comes from that program. In fact, I have a number of, I was looking at these pictures the other day. Beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can see.
Just oh yeah. No.
These are the students. They're making presentations. You know.
Yeah, no, you can see that.
See.
From
that program, you know.
And that's good to see. That's good to see. And which is why I'm saying we need to see more.
And we'll be exchanging stories. And when they present their thesis, we go and listen to them and give them advice and so on. We would exchange. We started having real friendship. You know, the guy would tell me that, hey man, I was pressed. I wanted to go to the toilet, you know, to do number one, man. And I go to the toilet, there's no toilet paper. And at that university, there used to be this thing of students stealing toilet paper to take it to their dormitories. And then the solution was you take your toilet paper with you from Pretoria, you know, or you steal one from the hotel. And we're building relationships, but at the same time, imparting knowledge that was taken away from us. That's how we carried on. But now when I went to Timber Labs, you know, and we hire an Indian chap, oh my God. In fact, I think these are things you should do. You should find out why people like me left and ask questions.
No, no, most definitely. I think those are the questions
ask questions.
we begin to ask.
The problem is that
you and I agree that there's a lot that needs to be done in this country, and that there's a lot that Black people need to learn about science, and there's a lot that Black people need to be taught about the contribution of Black science to the development of this country. And it's always great. I'm aware that you are pressed for time and you have to attend to your personal errands. And I think that is where we shall end it for today. And as always, it's been great having a conversation with you, Brother Murphy. And I really look forward to future engagements with you. And thank you for your time.
I heard you say thank you. Okay. I don't know what's happening. It is the God.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so you're going to this thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, all the best. Take care.
Thank you and take care.
The struggle was not red. I experienced it. Being deprived, being oppressed, even confused. It's enough now. We're taking the power back. We're stronger than before. We're proud, prouder, too strong. The worst is over from K.